Hey everybody and welcome back to the channel. In case you somehow managed to miss it, back in September, Xbox announced their intention to acquire Bethesda in what will undoubtedly go down in history as one of the biggest acquisitions of all time. But ever since then there's been a lot of questions and concerns brought up about it, so I figured I would sit down and give you my thoughts on the matter. But before I do, I have to remind you that if you end up liking this video, you should go down below, give it a like, share it with a friend, or better yet, subscribe to the channel. Your support really does mean a lot to me. Let's start by just getting some perspective on what a big deal this acquisition really is. Xbox spent $7.5 billion to acquire Bethesda. That's almost twice as much as Disney spent to acquire Lucasfilm, Star Wars, one of the biggest money-making IPs of all time, without a doubt. And Bethesda was worth almost twice that. In fact, there's a decent amount of analysts who are saying that Xbox kind of underpaid for them. If you're not a person who really follows the games industry as a business, which is perfectly fine, most people don't, the best way to, I think about this is with the Justice League analogy. Because the games industry, much like the Justice League, has its big three. The console manufacturers, right? You've got Xbox, Nintendo, PlayStation, and those are your equivalents of, Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman. And all the other Justice League members, who are all very powerful, but just not in that leadership positions, those are your EAs, your Ubisofts, your Square Enix, your Sega, and of course, your Bethesda. So for Xbox to acquire Bethesda is equally as big of a deal as if the Flash became Robin. It's just a massive power play, and every single villain in Gotham is totally screwed. So you might be asking, if this is such a big deal, such a huge acquisition, how did it end up happening in the first place? And I think it really comes down to three things. And I'm not some industry insider, I'm not a Jason Schreier or an Imran Khan, so it really is just my best guess. But I think it comes down to three major things. The first, and probably the most important one, is that Xbox and Bethesda have just always had a really great relationship. I mean, you don't have to look past the Elder Scrolls games to see proof of that. The first Elder Scrolls that came to consoles, Morrowind, was an Xbox original exclusive, and Oblivion was an exclusive for the 360. Even Skyrim, the most recent one, all of its DLC came first to the Xbox platform, and I think it was dramatically first. In fact, I think it was like several months later before it came to PlayStation. And on top of that, whenever you see like Phil and Pete and Todd together in like a behind the scenes thing or an interview or something, they always have such great chemistry that like I would not be at all surprised to find out that they were real, actual, like close personal friends. So Xbox and Bethesda have just always had a really great relationship. So when Bethesda started struggling financially, and we've been seeing hints that they were struggling financially as far back as I think 2016, whenever they were like trying to sell off a huge chunk of their shares, or even more recent games. You can look at the more microtransaction heavy sort of games as a service stuff that they were doing with Fallout 76, or how Rage 2 or Wolfenstein Youngblood kind of looked like they were rushed out a little bit as a way to get money coming in so that we can keep the lights on sort of situation. And I guess it's equally possible that those two games came out, sort of rushed because this deal was already in the works and the people at the top wanted to get a paycheck before they got a second really huge paycheck. But that does actually feel less likely. I think it's more likely that was just, proof of them kind of struggling financially. So when Microsoft approached them and they said, look guys, we're your friends and we have all the money in the world, because they really do. Microsoft has an estimated $136 billion cash on hand. I don't know if I made that clear originally. This was a cash transaction. They didn't have to go to a bank. They didn't have to leverage assets. This was cash on hand. Because that's just the weight that Microsoft carries, the buying power that Microsoft has in this industry. So, you know, when Bethesda was struggling and their friend approached them saying, hey, we can get you out of this, it was just a really easy deal to make, I think. So then the question sort of becomes, you know, what does Xbox get out of this, right? Because obviously on a business side of things, you're not going to spend $7.5 billion and not get anything in return, right? And the easy answer is that they sort of get to solve their biggest problem. Over the last 5, 6, 7 years, the thing that has been held against Xbox consistently is this notion of Xbox has no games, which has never been true. They've always had games. They were just not on the same level as maybe their competitors were. And they've taken a lot of steps to correct that, right? You know, acquiring Ninja Theory, acquiring Obsidian, Double Fine, so on and so forth. Like, they've taken a lot of steps in the right direction, but after this, I don't think there is any credence left in that argument whatsoever. I mean, just looking at the lineup of studios that they get out of this is absolutely amazing. I'll go through it for you. There's Alpha Dog, who primarily they do mobile games. They've done Wraithborn and Monstrosity, neither of which I've heard of, but apparently Wraithborn is doing very well. Roundhouse, which is the studio formerly known as Human Head, who you are more likely to have heard of because they did the original Prey game, as well as Brink and the Defiance MMO, if you remember that one. There's ZeniMax Online, who of course does the Elder Scrolls Online. There's Arcane, who does the Dishonored games, and they're working on Deathloop right now. There's Tango Gameworks, who does the Evil Within games and is currently working on Ghostwire Tokyo. There's id Software and Machine Games, both of which who do really great shooters. id does Doom, and Machine Games does Wolfenstein, and are now starting on a new Indiana Jones game, which is super cool. And by the way, apparently we need to start paying more attention to the background of dev interviews, because it's the second time I can think of in recent memory where something major has been hinted at in the background of an interview. But then obviously the biggest studio is Bethesda Softworks. They are a world-class RPG studio. I don't think anyone can argue that. And they, of course, worked on Fallout, Elder Scrolls, and are currently working on Starfield. So adding this huge portfolio of studios and games and IPs to the Xbox lineup completely destroys any argument saying that Xbox has no games. All you have to do is point a finger at this singular acquisition, and whoever is trying to make that point has no leg to stand on. And it's both quantity and quality, right? Especially when you consider that a lot of these studios have multiple teams, right? You've got Arcane has 2 studios, id has 2 studios, Bethesda has, I think, 4. So like it's called 8 studios, but really it's more like what, 12, 13, something like that. And it's not. It's a huge diversity of games as well. You know what I mean? Like, you're getting MMOs, you're getting shooter teams, horror games, stealth games, mobile games. You know, it's a huge breadth of genres, and it's also diverse in terms of just geographical spread, right? This is something that Phil Spencer has said that it's very important to him, is making sure that a bunch of different voices get to, you know, be heard through video games. And the number one way to do that is to make sure that you are having studios, you know, across the globe. And when even just the Bethesda acquisition, you know, you've got Tango in Japan, you've got id Software as a team in Germany, there's teams across America and in Canada, you know, and when you lay that on top of the map of where all of the existing Xbox first party teams are, and there's not a lot of gaps left in that, you know, that armor, that world spread, which is really great and really important as far as diversity is concerned. But it's not just these teams that they're getting, as if it's not enough, right? This is a huge deal already, just in terms of the teams, but it's not just the teams that they get. You have to keep in mind that they're also getting id Tech, which is an extremely powerful engine that they use to make the Doom games. You also get the Creation Engine, which is a very famous engine, not always for the most positive reasons, but it's about to get a really great, huge overhaul that it very much needs. And then who knows, that's another engine that they get to add to their portfolio. And there's also the Orion cloud streaming technology that Bethesda's been working on, which, as we know, Microsoft has been taking a lot of steps into making cloud streaming a thing going forward. So this is something that is very clearly important to them. So between all of that, right, all the studios, the increase in their diversity, all this new technology that they get, I don't think there's any way that Microsoft could have passed up on this deal. It's just such an amazing acquisition for them. Which is not to say that Xbox is the only guys coming out ahead in all of this, right? Bethesda also gets the two most important things in game development: time and money. Money, that's obvious, right? If you have the backing of Microsoft, it means that you don't have to do things like push microtransactions into the next Fallout game to get a little bit of extra money and make sure that you can keep the lights on. It means that you don't have to rush out games so that you can get that money coming back in. And because they're part of this huge studio family, it means that they have more time between their games. Because, Bethesda, they'll put out like 3-4 games in a year, right? Just by themselves. But now that they're part of this huge, I think Microsoft is like 23, 25, I don't even know what they're at this point, studios in their first party lineup. It means that Bethesda doesn't have to do that anymore. They can take more time with their games. They can take that time to do more bug testing, to fix more bugs. Bethesda can take the time to completely revamp the Creation Engine, which they've already started taking advantage of. It's this acquisition between Bethesda and Microsoft is this absolutely perfect symbiotic relationship, because both teams get to fix the things that are held against them. Microsoft gets to have some really great games added to their first party lineup so that people can't say that Xbox has no games, and Bethesda gets time to make sure that the games that they're making are as good as they can be, so people won't be able to continue saying, oh, Bethesda games are all broken, they're all buggy. It's just an absolutely perfect pairing. But despite all that, there's still this weird argument about whether or not Bethesda games are going to go exclusive to the Xbox ecosystem. And I think that line of questioning is just absolutely ridiculous. The question shouldn't be if Bethesda games are going to go exclusive to Xbox. It should be when. Because the thing that throws a monkey wrench into this whole situation is that because the acquisition is so huge, the deal hasn't actually gone through yet. It's going to go through, but the paperwork is still being filled out and all that. So all these games that have already been announced, Starfield, Elder Scrolls 6, Indiana Jones even, we don't know how far along those games are, which means we don't know, where they've been promised to go. If Starfield has already been promised to go to PlayStation, it's gonna go to PlayStation. That's the way we've seen Xbox play this out before. When they acquired Double Fine, Psychonauts 2 is still gonna launch on PlayStation, right? Because it was already promised to go there. And again, this, you see the same thing with Obsidian and Outer Worlds. That's just the way that Xbox does their business. So I don't think that it's strange to think that maybe Starfield will go to PlayStation. But at some point, that line is going to be drawn, and everything from that point on is going to be Xbox exclusive, with very few exceptions. I expect that Elder Scrolls Online will continue to be multi-platform because it's an MMO. Mobile games are not going to be exclusive to Android or Apple. They're just going to be mobile. Things like that. And I just think it's absolutely hilarious that that argument is coming up specifically with Bethesda, right? Because nobody questioned, oh hey, when they got Ninja Theory, hey, is the Hellblade 2 going to be exclusive? Because of course it was going to be, when the same thing with Obsidian and all the other acquisitions that they've done up to this point. And if PlayStation had acquired Bethesda, no one would be asking this question at all. People would be like, oh well, Bethesda games are PlayStation games now, like period, the end. You know what I mean? But Xbox has always been just shit on for trying to get exclusive games. Like they got a timed exclusive for a Tomb Raider game one time, and people were like, how dare you buy exclusive rights to a third-party game? And then you look across the sea at PlayStation, and they do it all the time, and no one says a damn thing, and I will never understand that double standard. So, and then again, with the Indiana Jones thing, people are currently saying like, oh, Indiana Jones is too big of an IP. That could never go exclusive. And then you look over at PlayStation, and it's like, they have Spider-Man as an exclusive title, and it's like, are you trying to tell me Spider-Man is smaller than Indiana Jones? Like, it's just the most wild arguments. But the point is, at some point, I don't know when exactly, every single Bethesda game going forward will be an Xbox exclusive title, and that is a huge get for Microsoft. And so, what does this mean going forward for us, the consumers, the people who play the games, And I think the number one takeaway for everyone should be, if you don't have Game Pass, you should absolutely have it. Because even any of these games that are not going to be exclusive, your Starfield, Indiana Jones, whatever, they will be launching day one in Game Pass. So it's just going to continue to be such an amazing deal. It's already the best deal in gaming, and it's only going to get better. Especially if you like Western style RPGs, between Obsidian and In Exile and now Bethesda. Like, if you don't have Game Pass and you like Western RPGs, you're doing yourself a disservice. But I think we should also be prepared for what this purchase means, right? Xbox has said on multiple occasions that their direct competitors, are no longer Nintendo and PlayStation. They are looking at Google and Amazon, and they are doing that for good reason. Amazon and Google and even Apple are all huge juggernaut tech companies that are moving into the game space. You see it with Stadia, with Luma, with Apple Arcade even. And if Microsoft can buy Bethesda, I don't think it's surprising to think that Amazon could buy EA or Google could buy Ubisoft. We could very quickly in the next couple years be seeing a complete change of the video game landscape. And I don't know if that's something we should be concerned about. It's definitely something that makes me personally a little uncomfortable. But regardless, it's something that I think we need to keep an eye on. But anyway, those are just my thoughts, right? Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. And thank you for watching all the way to the end of the video. It really makes a huge difference in growing my channel. But you all know the deal. Like, share, subscribe, and until next time, I'll see you around.